Welcome back to the Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes podcast, where your host, Tristan Keelan, and his guests explore everything about data, from culture to metrics to telling quality improvement stories for the human side of analytics. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes. Very excited today to welcome my guest into the studio, Dan Warner. Dan Warner is the executive director of the Community Data Roundtable. He is a resident CANS expert and data aficionado. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on board.
So we've got some really exciting stuff today. We're going to talk about scoring and essentially scoring integrity, making sure that the scores with which we are leaning on are being derived in the correct and responsible fashions. So Dan, why don't you introduce us a little bit to the Data Community Roundtable, and then we'll jump into your quality story.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on. A longtime listener, first time caller.
Dan and I are guest swapping. I was on his show a month or two ago, and now we have Dan here.
Yeah. Behavioral health, quality implementations. It's a small world, especially those of us really on the data side and the large scale quality side. And it's always fun to work with other professionals who are so serious and innovative in this field, because I do love my work. I am the executive director for Community Data Roundtable. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to a data-driven human services system. We work with governments, managed care, providers, and advocates to steer large-scale outcomes implementations that accomplish change. And we do much of this with our software product called the Data Pool, which provides portals and visualizations. As I was just telling Tristan, I'm a big visualization guy and like looking at stuff. I like trying to make systems, behavioral health systems, making them something we can see is very difficult and novel. And that's one of my big joys in life. And we do it for all levels of an implementation. So today, totally in line with the nature of this podcast, I want to talk about a case where we review data. I want to show how we looked at it, all in service of being able to get good quality measures of outcomes, and as well as treatment planning and other things. So just let me give a quick background for those who don't know what the CANS is. It stands for the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Assessment, the CANS. It's used a lot in child welfare, or where you have like system of care, high fidelity wraparound programs, where you have children in multiple systems and you need a tool to make a plan that works across multiple systems. As well as then you can track the data of that plan that you make it. Because if you get together every 6 months and reassess using this tool, you get a structured way of looking at what's getting better, what's getting worse. So this tool was devised by a fella named John Lyons. He's now at the University of Kentucky, and it's gotten pretty big. It's used in a lot of states and a lot of large systems to do what I just described. The issue is that how do you know that people are doing this right? So to actually become a CANS certified person, you get recertified annually. You have to take a class, and then you have to pass a test. And this should work, and this does work in many ways because these implementations are out there. But how do you know that you haven't missed something? First of all, to get certified, you got certified on a whole vignette, but that doesn't mean you knew every particular item very well. So there can be divergences on that. Second, the inventor of the tool and I have had conversations, and he's aware of implementations where there's cultures that emerge and different levels of care, different programs will score certain items certain ways based on certain trainings they took or certain understandings they have of their role in the system. Then there's also communication gaps, systematic problems with software. There's all sorts of things that can get scores off, as well as biases within raters themselves that could be influencing things that we don't fully account for, that doesn't fully get identified in the certification process, but are endemically impacting your data.
I love what you just said there, Dan, that cultures emerge. And I think there's a tendency in folks who are thinking about data to think about it as this holy truth. And not that there's anything wrong with looking at data as the truth, but it is a truth that comes from humans create data before data can be data itself, right? And the idea that cultures emerge. So for agencies out there, if you don't think your culture is reflected in your data in various ways, think again. What you just mentioned, the way in which you uh, score an assessment, right on down to what you choose to track, what you choose to report, what you choose to analyze. Those are all human choices, not data choices. It's really great insight.
Yeah, it makes me think of the famous expression that the fish doesn't know it's in water. The fish doesn't know it's in a fishbowl.
Hmm.
We operate in ways that we are certain we know what things are and how things work and what they mean, and it's only to us who are in the mix. So you need to get an objective view of your data to see some things that you would just never see because it just makes too much sense to you. You hadn't even thought to ask the question.
Yeah.
So one of the let me show you. Let me show you how we looked at that data just so people know the data we're looking at today is from an implementation we have here across about half of Pennsylvania in the Medicaid behavioral health system. We're active in different implementations across the nation, but this is where this data is coming from here in particular. And so those of you at home listening on your podcast, you got to go to the YouTube and take a look at this cool visualization that we have for comparing data quality. But I'm going to use my words and paint a picture for everyone. So this is what I call the stalactite stalagmite graph. And what it does is it compares the CANS ratings on 10 key items. So for every program, there's a method that exists for identifying what are the key items for this level of care. So I've got those all on my x-axis on the bottom, and then I've also got them on the top. And on the top, I'm measuring how one level of care, how evaluators scored these items. And on the bottom, I've got how the master's level clinicians who actually work in the home scored these items. And then we compare. We basically compare. And this white area in the middle is when the two levels, the evaluators and the master's level people, scored them the same way, especially on the same kid within the last 30 days. Because that's one of the fun things about what I get to do, which is large scale implementations. And when you have large scale implementations, there are times where a child will get assessed with this tool twice within 30 days. That's a wonderful opportunity to look at how well and how different these two different levels are rating this child. And when I did that, once again, this white here in the middle is the time that there was agreement. So you can see with this item called autism, there was about, if you include the lights here, about 99% agreement in rating, which is great. That's what you want. That's a good implementation. Everyone's scoring it correctly. But if you look at this item here, living situation, you'll see that 44% of the time, it was not a perfect scoring match. That's less than half of the time are people agreeing that this is a problem. Um, in fact, though, we start to see more than that. There's a bias. We can see through this, for people who are seeing this on YouTube, the purple, you can see there's more purple. That means that the evaluators are scoring higher, more acutely. 34% of the time, they're doing it by just one, which would technically be okay, but you still don't want 34% of the time for that to be happening. But technically, being off by one is fine on the CANs. However, 16% of the time, we're off by two, which is a big deal because that means you're having a different kind of treatment plan and you're very much off. You can see that bias also, once again, is way more to one side. It's to these psychologist evaluators, while the master's level people who are actually in the home working with the child, much less bias towards an acuity score.
Yeah. Off by two could change the whole course of treatment that's determined, right? Yeah.
It could impact the decision support algorithm,
Mhm.
which triggers what level of care this child qualifies for.
Mhm.
It could also impact the treatment plan and the exact things that are being worked on. So it's a very big deal to be off by
Mhm.
two.
Make no mistake, if that's the treatment that's required, then that's what's required. But if you're providing a higher level of care than is necessary because of biases in the scoring, skews in the data here, you could be doing more harm than good if you're providing too intensive an intervention, right?
Right. And also, when we talked to the evaluators, they said, well, these master's level people are not good at assessment. They just get normalized to the situation, and our expertise identifies that this is what needs to be worked on. So I can't tell you what's true here.
Mm-hmm. And if not corrected or rectified appropriately, those biases will only get more entrenched, more intense.
Exactly. So what do we do?
So what did you do?
What did we do?
Yeah.
So one thing that everyone agreed they didn't want to do was just have the next person who scores a cans get the previous cans up, which is something sometimes people say. That way we don't have to do a reassessment. We'll just change the little things that need to be changed. And that would get rid of this problem because there's only one cans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, pro tip, that's going to ruin your data. I've seen it happen in a lot of places. You get no change anymore because people don't do a full new reassessment. They just open it up. If there's something that crosses their mind that needs to be changed, they do. Otherwise, they leave it alone. And you just lose detail and dynamism and the strength of a full new assessment. So what we did instead is we put this little circle or this little box around what the previous rating was. So let me explain. When someone pulls up a CANS form in our application, the data pool, they see a little box around the number that was the previous rating and the date of that previous rating. So it's just giving you information as you're rating the tool right in front of you. Hey, just so you know, a couple weeks ago, this was a 2. So that informs your decision-making to ask about it. That informs your decision-making. If you've got concerns or confusions, you can reach out with the in-app email service that we have to communicate about a case. But the point is it just tells you what happened, and then you can make the call from there. It doesn't do the scoring for you based on the fact that something happened, but it informs you. And let me show you the results that had. And now for those people on their podcast, I've got 2 graphs in front of you. One that has a lot of purple on the before picture, which showed that bias towards evaluators. And then once we put that technical intervention in, we see the reduction of that purple and we see a lot more white. In fact, 95% of the time now, the raters are within reliability. Maybe there's a little bit more. In fact, you can still see there's still a little bit more bias on the purple side. Do you see that, Tristan?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Vouch for me. Yeah. There is still some systematic cultural differences between how evaluator psychologists score and the people on the ground score. But that's a fine variability. We're not trying to destroy a worldview. We're not trying to make homogenized care, but this shows better communication, more uniform treatment planning, and thus you're also going to get better outcomes and understanding of your system.
Yeah, you have the two teams better aligned, more on the same page in terms of treatment planning. Now, you've achieved 95% reliability. Is that a goal you set out to achieve, or what was your hypothesis about where you'd like to see this in terms of what's reasonable versus what's a problem?
That's a good question. And of course, good quality managers do set goals, do set numerical goals. And I have to say, I'm awful at that. I'm a big, we got to get together. We got to visualize the data and the problem, and then we got to improve it. But I'm so woeful to predict what something is going to actually impact. So I'll be honest with you. I should have set a numerical goal for this, but I really said, let's see if it improves things is what I did.
Yeah, I'm gonna join you, and I'm gonna throw out an unpopular opinion here. That I do believe it is okay to start a quality project without a determined success point in mind. And here's why. A lot of times, especially in this industry, there is not enough study on enough metrics that we can all agree on what success looks like on particular metrics. And so to use your own agency numbers as a baseline and say the goal is to do better than this, and then see if you can do better than that, and then better than that, And then when you plateau, maybe that's what is within the reasonableness of achievability, right? And so I'm gonna stake my flag in on that unpopular
Yeah.
opinion that your goal doesn't have to be a numerical achievement objective. It can simply be better than before.
Yeah, I would say when I do HEDIS work,
Hmm.
what I often try to do is set the goal of one Z-score, right? So one standard
Yeah.
deviate. We moved it enough that we know it's significant. How about
Right.
that? So
Yep. I
that
like that.
we did something in that direction.
I like that. I like that.
So I'll just close off here. Um, just please do know, just because people passed a reliability test doesn't mean your network is rating every item correctly. And it's worth looking into that because and one good way to do that is look between programs, because programs are going to have these cultures for various reasons, and there's opportunities. There should be in a large system. There's typically opportunities to compare scores nicely. And whatever application you're using to rate that cans, make sure it's really a tool for improving communication. There's a lot of stuff out there. And this is true across all assessments, all of them. A lot of the assessment tools are really about rating the tool. Me as a person filling in the form, sending it off to Valhalla. Well, it should do more than that. It should be facilitating the communication, because that is what these tools are really about, is bringing communication together. So um, all sorts of possibilities are available for that,
Yeah.
and take advantage of that.
I've encountered a similar similar concept but different strategy, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. And I think it certainly won't work in all situations with all tools or all clients. But what are your thoughts on having the client take their own version of the cans, and you as the clinical provider do your version, and see how the client perceives their scores in relation to your scores? Not necessarily because that'll become, part of the clinical path, but to check your own drift and say, how does the client view themselves on the scale that I'm scaling them on all the time? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that approach?
Well, I think that's a great idea. That is a system that many people in Cannes world do. I
Mhm.
want to say I saw that once again, a culture thing. I think that was a part of something I saw in Boulder, Colorado's child welfare implementation several years ago. But it absolutely is the right way to do that, because it's a very concrete representation from the consumer of their
Right.
sense of things. And whatever they don't understand, you should talk out. But fundamentally, that submitted cans at the end should look exactly like what the consumer would want.
That's right.
There's always debate about that, or edge cases of psychosis and blah, blah, blah. Sure, fair enough. But
Yeah. You
uh,
you could almost use the comparison as the topic for discussion, right? I I,
right.
I scored this, you scored that. Why are we different? And let's talk about that.
Mhm.
Good way to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, really great stuff, Dan. Thanks for joining me today. Any final thoughts for my listeners about data?
We,
Check out the datacommunityroundtable.org.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Please come to our webpage, communitydataroundtable.org. But I was just going to say, as a last note, we gotta do one of these Flash Force 5 things, you and I, and get some other, put talking heads and quality to, because, I'm telling you, they're going to line up on YouTube for this.
Very good. Right. This has been another episode of Data Doesn't Equal Outcomes. My guest today was Dan Warner, Executive Director at the Data Community Roundtable. Dan, thanks for being with us, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.